Welcome, dear students. Today we are going to learn about the role of natural resources in economic development. Natural resources are considered to be very important aspects of nations' or regions' economy. But are they also equally vital for the process of economic development? The qualitative and quantitative progress that an economy makes in a specific time frame is referred to as its economic development. A significant component of economic development, among many others, is economic growth as measured by increases in overall gross domestic product, GDP, and in market productivity. Ensuring the social and economic well-being of the population is, however, the ultimate growth of economic development in any country. So what are the natural resources? Any natural product that humans can obtain from nature to suit their requirements are referred to as natural resources. These are the resources that can be used in their unaltered natural state and can be easily and naturally found on our globe. Natural resources are often understood to include things like soil, water, coal, timber, sunlight, oil. Because these resources are dispersed haphazardly around our world, each location has a unique set of natural resources that support its economic growth. These materials are found in certain regions in abundance, while they are scarce in others due to their random distribution. In order for natural resources to be available for future generations, it is crucial that humans use them wisely and sustainably. Two basic categories of natural resources are: the natural resources which have a limited stock in nature are classified as non-renewable resources. Because of frequent utilization, the finite non-renewable resources have eventually become less plentiful. Thus, it's crucial that we manage our non-renewable resource usage carefully to prevent their depletion. Uranium, coal, natural gas, petroleum are few examples of non-renewable resources. Natural resources that are capable of spontaneous restoration are known as renewable resources. While some of these resources such as air, sunlight are always and everywhere available, others like water, wood take time to replenish. Thus, even they are vulnerable to exhaustion if these resources are depleted more quickly than nature can replenish them. Natural resources are present everywhere in the world, but in different amounts. It is simpler for the local population to obtain and utilize resources in a specific area due to their inherent availability. If a certain natural resource is unavailable, a nation must rely on other nations to obtain it, which requires the former to invest significant financial resources in the transaction. Being the foundation of economic activity and development, natural capital encompassing natural resource stocks, land and ecosystems is often undervalued and mismanaged. This imposes costs to the economy and society, which may sometimes be considerable, shaving off several digits of annual increase in the gross domestic product of a country. Rich natural resource reserves enable a region to supply the energy required for economic growth, which is generally favorable to economic development. From the standpoint of global economic development, however, areas endowed with abundant natural resources may not always be the ones with greater economic development. They might even turn out to be economically backward. Numerous global economists have noted that a region's economic development picks up speed when it has an abundance of natural resources, either renewable or non-renewable. It should be remembered, nevertheless, that how natural resources are used and exploited relies on the attitude of local people. For this reason, the observation has occasionally been observed to be true. Several studies have also concluded that nations with an abundance of natural resources often expand more slowly than those with a scarcity of resources. This theory is known as the resource curse. The term resource curse mostly describes the situation where a nation or region has an abundance of natural resources without corresponding economic growth. Some nations' economy are impacted by the abundance of resources. Growth is more of a constraint than a sufficient gain. The Dutch disease is the most well-known illustration of resource curse. Dutch disease is a concept that describes an economic phenomenon where the rapid development of one sector of an economy, particularly natural resources, precipitates a decline in other sectors. Huge natural gas reserves were found in the Netherlands in the 1970s, and the oil industry was flourishing. But the economy as a whole remained stagnant. The creation of new resources drove out local non-resource industries. Trade surplus grew and the real exchange rate rose, hurting industry and agriculture's ability to compete globally. Certain resource-rich nations are ensnared in resource curses that are hard to escape and have become resource traps. For instance, the 20th century saw drastically different economic growth outcomes in Switzerland and Japan, which are resource-deficient countries, and Africa, mainly which are resource-rich countries. On the other hand, several nations endowed with abundant resources have benefited from natural resources without experiencing the resource curse. Natural resources, for instance, are significantly positively correlated with the United States economy's quick expansion. There is also a resource blessing effect, and the wealth of natural resources stimulates economic growth. On the other hand, underdeveloped nations typically lack financial resources and a history of technological innovations. As a result, in order to support their economic growth, these nations decide to either expand the development of their natural resources or export the developed resources outside or resource-intensive industries. According to classical economists, the growth of national wealth is seen as being significantly influenced by natural resources. Economists have since argued in other studies that resource-related research is overlooked and that resources are not particularly significant for sustained economic growth. Resources are neutral in their opinion and they have no bearing on labor or technology. About 40% of empirical studies conclude that natural resources have a negative impact on economic growth, often referred as natural resource curse. 40% find no effect and 20% find a favorable effect. The size of two fundamental variables, the present and possible future income flows, determines the economic relevance of natural resources. The first is mostly determined by market demand and manufacturing costs, while the second is influenced by management strategy and the endowment of natural resources. The true value of natural resources can only be realized when present and future revenue streams are considered. Resource-rich nations can provide the groundwork for long-term development and the reduction of poverty by managing their natural resources responsibly. In the case of renewable resources, and as resources of income for investments in future growth in case of non-renewable resources. The management of natural resources is consequently a crucial component of economic development. Since the wealth represented by natural resources comprises a substantial amount of wealth of most countries, frequently more than the wealth represented by generated capital. The increase in commodity prices has resulted in notable increases in natural resource earnings for numerous governments. It is anticipated that natural resources, including minerals, oil, gas, and timber, will remain important in resource-rich economies due to rising demand from fast-expanding economies, declining non-renewable resource supplies, and approaching maximum sustained yield levels for renewable resource harvests. It should come as no surprise that nations with abundant natural capital have the capacity to generate sizable current revenue from their resources. The impoverished can rely on natural resources and healthy functioning ecosystems as a safety net, especially during economic downturns. These resources offer sustenance in the form of plant and animal wildlife, rich soils for subsistence farming and fuel food. The poor must have access to resources and participate in resource management decision making in order to benefit from being able to rely on such safety nets. This will give them a stake in managing resources sustainably and averting the tragedy of the commons. Furthermore, through funding for job training and education, natural resource earnings can support the growth of human capital. Because the poor and less developed nations are more likely to be directly independent on resources for their livelihoods, they bear a disproportionate share of the costs associated with an inadequate management of natural resources worldwide. Inadequate resource management encompasses the inability to sustainably manage renewable resources, such as when overfishing causes stock collapses, as well as the improper investment of proceeds from the sale of non-renewable resources and the improper collection of taxes from resource concessions, which permits the majority of resource gains to benefit private parties at the expense of the general public. For resource management to contribute to a nation's economic and social development, as opposed to just short-term growth based on unstable sources of income, the natural capitals approach, NCA, is a method for determining the true value of natural resources. In order to promote dialogue, cooperative decision-making, and sane policy for sustainable development, the natural capitals approach aims to provide decision-makers and stakeholders with trustworthy tools to comprehend the role of renewable and non-renewable resources in an economy. NCA views the natural environment as the foundation for all human activity, including economically productive activity, and applies the concept of capital to it. Historically, the term capital has been used to describe assets created by humans, such as knowledge, building, capital, money, and securities. Because it generates an income stream or other economically beneficial activities, capital acts as the cornerstone for additional wealth generation. Natural resource capital comes in two varieties: non-renewable resources like oil and minerals, and renewable resources like fisheries and forests. When responsibly maintained, renewable resources produce a growing number of resources that can be used for an endless amount of time. Since non-renewable resources cannot replenish themselves over periods of time that are important to humans, they can only be depleted. The revenue resulting from the depletion of non-renewable resources should be viewed as a loss of capital rather than as income, equivalent to that obtained from the flows of renewable resources, since this revenue is best understood as natural capital. The United States, the United Kingdom, France, China, India, Russia, and Germany are the largest and most powerful economies in the world. These nations have large deposits of natural resources. According to the World Bank, Russia is a major supplier of minerals, including gold and diamonds, as well as mineral fuels like gas, oil, and coal. It is estimated that Russia owns more than $75.5 trillion worth of natural resources. China possesses a wide range of mineral resources, including fossil fuels like coal, natural gas, and crude oil. China happens to be a paramount supplier of graphite, antimony, vanadium, phosphates, zinc, lead, molybdenum, and gold. It is also the second most sizable distributor of silver, manganese, bauxite, and copper. It is estimated that China has over $23 trillion worth of natural resources spread over its land. The United States is rich in natural gas, oil, gold, coal and lumber. The United Kingdom is home to arable land, coal, petroleum, iron ore, zinc, lead, salt and silica. Its economy is ranked 5th in the world. France's economy is the 7th largest in the world, behind that of the United States, China, Japan, Germany, India and the United Kingdom. Large-scale production and crop foods are supported by its abundant arable land. However, because they were widely mined and exhausted during the Industrial Revolution, their mineral resources are not as significant now. Coal, natural gas, uranium, and renewable energy sources like solar wind, hydropower, and thermal energy are among its reserves. Germany possesses vast deposits of copper, uranium, arable land, natural gas, coal, and wood. In addition to being the world's top producer of manganese ore, India also produces 12% of the thorium and 60% of the mica produced worldwide. Simultaneously, the metal and mining sector in India is valued at an incredible $106.4 billion US. The MENA, Middle East North African countries, hold nearly 6% of the world's population. 60% of its oil resources and 45% of its gas reserves, in addition to having an abundance of natural resources. Because of the region's substantial natural gas and petroleum reserves, the MENA economies contribute significantly to global economic prosperity. The region's relevance and strategic importance are increased by the wealth of gas and oil resources found domestically, high energy consumption and energy exports to meet global energy demands. Natural resources in Saudi Arabia are estimated to be worth $34.4 trillion. In addition of being the 5th largest natural gas reserves in the world, Saudi Arabia possesses the 2nd largest oil reserves in the world, which make up almost 20% of all oil reserves worldwide. Control over corruption and high-quality institutions are the two more aspects that have an impact on the beneficial role of natural resources play in the growth progress. To maximize economic growth and fully utilize natural resources, institutional quality needs to be raised. It was also proposed that to transform the resource curse into a resource blessing, economies should invest in human capital and control corruption. Therefore, the relationship between natural resources and economic growth may become unfavorable in the presence of weak institutions, low human capital, and high levels of corruption. It has also been emphasized that a large number of resource-rich nations, including those in Latin America and the Gulf, have failed to attain sustainable growth. This suggests that improved economic performance might not be dependent solely on the availability of natural resources. An extensive body of study has also been conducted in the Middle East and on the effects of natural resources, particularly oil, on economic growth. Furthermore, these nations were discovered to have mostly avoided the curse of natural resources. Still, other research indicates that the Middle Eastern countries, which are wealthy in resources, are growing at a comparatively modest pace. India's natural resources, such as the forests, food, air, suffered from its economic boom. This condition was disclosed in an Environment Accounts report issued by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. It claims that 11 states saw a decrease in their natural capital between 2005 to 2015, when the average growth rate of gross state domestic product (GSDP) for nearly all states was between 7 and 8%. Just 3 states witnessed a gain in natural capital of more than 5%, while 13 states only exhibited marginal growth in the range of 0 to 5%. This economic growth model might not allow the nation to maintain its current pace of development for very long. A few encouraging developments are also shown in the study. For instance, there is an increase in certain indices in Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Jharkhand, Kerala, Maharashtra and Odisha, such as the conversion of fallow land to farming, the expansion of forest cover in conjunction with rising carbon stocks, and the discovery of new mineral sources. However, it demonstrates the worrisome implications of urbanization, climate change, and the depletion of forest resources. Most countries suffer from ecological deficits, relying on nature for more than it can replenish. The demand for resources from elsewhere is increasing, which puts a strain on those resources. A resource-constrained world requires investing in technology and infrastructure. As a result of the extraction, processing, manufacturing, consumption, and disposal of waste at every stage of life cycle of a product or service, unsustainable consumption and production deplete not only natural resources but also cause environmental impacts. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution are the planetary crises humans face due to unsustainable consumption and production. Burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas for energy make climate change one of the most well-known environmental impacts of unsustainable production and consumption. Thus, natural resource extraction, exploration, mining, and processing have all resulted in ecological disturbances, flora and fauna destruction, air, water, land pollution, landscape degradation, desertification, and global warming. Natural resources are therefore managed sustainably as part of natural resource management. Natural resource management aims to achieve a sound ecological environment by formulating and implementing practical goals. Integrating natural resources into sustainable development incorporates research into stakeholder-driven adaptive management and innovation processes to improve livelihoods, agricultural productivity, and environmental services at local, regional, and global levels. In terms of economic development, sustainable economic growth is the development of a country that strives to meet the needs of its people, but also preserves natural resources and the environment for the benefit of future generations. Reportedly, 1% increase in natural resource depletion will result in a 0.012% degradation of the environment. And in the long run, it will result in 0.016% degradation. In the short run, a 1% increase in economic growth will result in a 0.60% degradation of the environment. And in the long run, it will result in a 0.077% degradation. These findings indicate that natural resources can be depleted and pollution generated by producing and consuming goods. As income increases, consumption increases as well. But as it does so, composition changes, which can either increase or reduce environmental impacts. Environmental degradation is associated with the depletion of natural resources in the long run. Natural resources often drive development and wealth creation. Resources have been used more and more as industrialization progressed. Exploitation levels sometimes exceeded resources' natural regeneration rates. As a result of such overexploitation, the livelihoods and well-being of populations that rely on these resources are threatened. This is also true of the health of the ecosystem that depend on these resources. In order to ensure the social and economic well-being of both the current and future generations, sustainable development must prioritize the preservation of the environment and natural resources. Thus, the role of economic development is complementary to both climate change and environmental sustainability. Thus, natural resource abundance seems to have a significant effect on economic growth. Natural resources are an internal factor and government policy is an external factor, and both decide the sustainable economic growth of a region. It is indisputable that natural resources are important, particularly for the development. Students should always be concerned about the natural resources and environment, and since they are the nation's future. Events and missions should be carried out to emphasize how important environmental protection is. Every country should periodically conduct awareness campaigns. Overuse of natural resources such as coal and all others depletes resource reserves, and this leads to pollution issues. Thus, that needs to be attended as well. A country may create industries, create jobs, produce commodities, engage in international trade, and raise the living standards and income levels of its citizens when it has the natural resources and the technology to exploit them. Thank you all for joining today's lecture. I hope you found